portal of grief is so unpredictable, and there's
Mm.
no linear pathway through it. In processing his death, the next day and the second day after it happened, you can be in the most extreme guttural pain. I'm experiencing the whole thing. And then fast forward, I'm at 2 years now, and the intensity of the waves when it comes, I'm so familiar with it that I now have the tools. I can feel when it's coming. I know how to move inward and hold space for that magnitude and let go of any expectation of what it should be, how it should look, what the linear timeline of it should be. I just feel like it's so important to talk about because it doesn't look the same for any two individuals. And there's so much pressure that we put on ourselves to make progress in some linear way. Like, okay, it's been a year, so I should be crying randomly anymore. I shouldn't be so down anymore. Like, I should have it more together. We have all of these self-proclaimed like markers and timelines that we've placed onto this process, when in reality, it is something that is interwoven into our being now. So the way that it ebbs and flows into our present moment, there's no way to know how that's going to come. There's no way to project as to how that's going to look.
Welcome to SoulPod, where science meets mysticism and your inner wisdom leads the way. I'm your guide, Crystal Cassidy, and together we will bridge the seen and the unseen, science and spirituality, the practical and the profound. From quantum physics to energy centers, near-death experiences to extraterrestrial contact, join us as we delve into the mysteries of consciousness and journey together towards a more awakened, compassionate, and soul-connected world. Find your seat, drop in, and let's go on a journey together. Welcome back, light beings. Excited to be in conversation with you here today. We are going to go deep into a conversation around grief. This isn't something we typically talk too much about, so I'm really glad that we're giving it some time and some space today. And this episode will come out during the holiday season, which we as a team felt was really important because during this time, a lot of times it can bring up grief, and there's all this joy and happiness and family and friends. And then there's also this reminder of loss and the challenges of different types of transitions, which we'll talk about as a whole, about what grief is. And it can be anything from you're grieving a timeline that you've let go of, or a way of being that you no longer are, a friendship, a loved one, a relationship, the death of a friend or family member, a pet. It can vary, growing older and that relationship to youth, it can vary so greatly. So we want to give this topic of grief some space and time. And we also have a grief portal coming out in SoulPod. By the time of this episode, it should be live, so you can check it out. And it's really going to help you move through this process of grief and the waves that it encompasses in a way that's intentional and powerful. And I am joined in the conversation today by Cat Mansfield, who made the grief portal. So we're going to go deep into this conversation with her. Thank you, Kat, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to exploring this topic together. It's a big one.
It's a big one and a long time coming, so I'm so glad we're doing it. So maybe to start us off, let's talk about some definitions. What is grief? What is it not? What first comes to mind for you?
Oof. Yeah, it's interesting because for me, it's almost like trying to define love, right? It's such a potent experience that once you feel it, it's so clear. This is grief. I remember not too long ago, we were playing with potentially naming the grief portal something else. And when we were sitting with it, we came back together and we're like, we can't, because there's one specific name for this experience, and
Mm-hmm.
it's grief. And so
Right.
grief it's an initiation. Like, that's one of, it's an overarching way to define grief, but that's truly what it is. It's an initiation into a new version of self. You are not the same person you were before you experience grief as you are after experiencing grief, because grief is this force that is so powerful and so large, and once it's unleashed within us, the potential energy it carries, it either it has the potential to create destruction or to completely alter the course of our life so that we're more in our gifts, in our light, in our connectedness to truth. So grief, I think, has this, in a way, negative connotation because our society is
Mm-hmm.
so structured around avoiding quote unquote negative emotions. So we do everything we can to avoid feeling grief. And grief isn't good or bad. It's simply this powerful force that, if we're willing to welcome it into our lives and choose for it to be a gift because it's so powerful, like we get to like welcome this force and yield its power and yield its energy in a way that we decide as creators, then again, it's not good or bad. It's an initiation. It's a gift. So yeah, it's a difficult one to nail down into like a clear definition. But when you feel
I
it,
think
you know it.
you, yeah, I think you definitely did a good job of that. I found some clarity myself in that it's, yes, it is a feeling, but I like the word initiation because I think that's really what the experience feels like. Like you mentioned, grief changes you. It shifts something within you and you're no longer the same. And that is the definition of an initiation.
Hmm.
So I love looking at grief in that way. And to your point, I also want to double click on the fact that we do tend to, in spiritual development, focus on these elevated states of being. And there's a reason for that. But there's an equally important reason to focus on the challenging. And it's like you said, it's not good or bad, it's just different experiences. And
Yeah.
fear and grief and all these different, you could call them like lower frequencies, but I'm not convinced that it really is. It's just you're dipping down into a different experience so that you understand more. It's like the concept of the lotus being in the mud. The
Hmm.
mud is necessary for its blossoming. It wouldn't be a lotus without it. And
Right.
then you can erupt back during the next daylight into the light. You go back into the mud. It's this really important process. And there's not just, if we're in this human experience, there's not just all hanging out in the light. That's not why we're here.
Mm-mm. No.
So I really like that we're grounding this conversation and talking about grief as an initiation.
Hmm. Yeah, it truly feels like that. And I think one of the mm, challenges that people face when they are moving through that initiation is that we desperately want to hold on to the version of ourselves that we were before the
Mm,
initiation, before grief. To, we're unwilling to transform and watch as the powerful force that is grief moves through us, through our lives, weaves itself into our being. It's because it's so painful. There's this
mm,
unwillingness, this resistance. But so much of grief is asking us to trust, to surrender, to turn ourselves over to this force and believe that the version of us that will exist on the other side of this initiation is one that is where we're meant to go on our soul's unique journey, on our soul's unique evolution. And this grief was placed here. We don't need to know why, whatever loss it is that we're experiencing. We don't need to know why. We don't need to understand.
It's not a punishment.
Right.
It's just life.
We just have to trust that it is a divine catalyst in our soul's evolution, and that this initiation of grief is one that your soul is meant to experience at this time. So the invitation is to truly surrender and move through the portal in all of the chaos and everything that is unleashed within that portal, and trust that this new version of self is one that at some point will start to feel familiar, this new landscape will at some point start to feel like home.
That's beautiful. Yeah, there was an actor, I can't remember his name. Oh, Andrew Garfield just came to me. That had lost.
That is.
Yeah, Spider-Man.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We're not big Marvel girlies here. Maybe Thor, but anyways. So he had lost his mom, and he was on a talk show, and he was talking about grief, and he was saying, I mean, he said it so beautifully, but it was along the lines of like, yeah, his grief is his like acknowledgement of how much he loved his mom. It was a barometer, or the capacity of love that he had for that person. And it really makes me from a spiritual perspective very curious, because it's almost like grief is asking us to do so many things, to shift, to change, but it's really pointing our awareness to, especially in the context of having lost somebody that's now, and we call it losing somebody too, which I think is so interesting, the wording. It's all in the context of separation. That person is gone and they're just no longer in your experience. And in the physical, there's some truth to that. But from a spiritual perspective, and of course we would get to this at some point, and we can get into it deeper later, they're still with you. The relationship's just changed. But there's still a grief of that relationship having changed. It's not the same, to your point, as being able to call somebody up. Like, something has fundamentally changed, and you're becoming more aware of that, and what really is lost and what is gained is such an interesting thing to think about.
I was going to add, we touch on that in the grief portal, how we've been programmed in our culture to believe that in losing something, this loss on a physical realm, and it is interesting that our culture orients around passing and death as loss versus, this celebration, but we can get into that. But knowing that this loss, despite it having dissolved in the physical realm, that in our presence, in our dissolution into right now, we have access to everything. We have access to every timeline that we once felt attached to, because I think so much of grief is the dissolution of all of those timelines that felt like a birthright. If you're talking about losing, for example, my journey with grief is I lost my dad 2 years ago on Christmas, and the dissolution of all of the timelines that felt like they were mine, that felt like my birthright, my privilege to have, like him walking me down the aisle, him seeing my children, all of these timelines that felt real already, dissolving in real time. There's so much disorientation that takes place around that. You're discombobulated in this new reality. All of the scaffolding of what you knew to be true no longer exists, because the future that you were leaning on as scaffolding for right now no longer exists. So now is wobbly, doesn't have anything to stand on. But in the healing process, returning to that knowing that in our breath, in returning to now, we can access anything, any soul, any timeline, any version of self, any knowing, like we have access to all of that. So it truly is reorienting around the relationship is one, instead of like calling him on the phone, I'm calling him through my channel, through my crown. I'm calling him in the quantum, and it's a different kind of phone,
Mm.
and it's a different
Mm-hmm.
kind of conversation where when I feel that pang of like, oh, I wish I could just call him, on the
Mm.
phone in this
Yeah.
3D world. I just wish I could call him, and feeling the like compulsion to believe that I don't have access to him anymore. That's like a belief that we're given. We don't have access to these people anymore, these versions of
Mm.
self, these timelines. But I can choose to believe that, or I can choose in those moments to still call him, to still like extend my antenna upwards and call him,
Mm-hmm.
and that takes time as like because it doesn't hit the same in this 3D body and in this human experience to call him with my, crown as it does with my cell phone. But
Yeah.
it it's a it's a knowing that over time it helps the healing and guides you towards a greater connection and acceptance with the unseen world that is still with us.
Mm. And thank you so much for being so open with your journey. I think it'll help a lot of people to hear, that they're not alone, and that, I mean, oh my gosh, you lost your dad on Christmas. I mean, that's what an intensity to the timing.
And
What a
also so
juxtaposition.
poetic and
So
so,
poetic.
I'm like, you would choose this day. It's so clear. There were so, I mean, still processing it, always be processing it, but
Mm.
in the immediate like months, weeks, days after, just all of the like poetic and symbolism and just everything that about choosing that day. It was quite beautiful in a way.
Absolutely. So, and you mentioned, you said he chose that day.
Mm.
Do you think we choose when we leave?
Yeah, this is interesting because I've spent a lot of time in since his passing connecting with him and talking to him and metabolizing the confusion and the,
Mm.
in a way, anger and
Mm-hmm.
and mostly confusion of like
That's
why now?
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. How
Would you say that's like the initial experience of like a big shift in your life? Is that confusion element?
Yeah, I think the confusion and disorientation are both the
Yeah.
words that come up. Like disorientation feels really applicable to my experience where I didn't know which way was up anymore. I didn't
Yeah.
know who I was in relation to anything anymore because this, especially when it's such a strong soul contract as a parent, and specifically my father and I had such a deep connection, like
Mm.
the there's so many just clear parallels of my soul and his soul, and how why we chose each other and as in this relationship dynamic in this lifetime. But and in my experience, what's come through from him is that it is a choice, and it was decided way before we all came into these 3D iterations of self. Like it was decided at a round table, not literally, but the metaphorical round table that our souls are at before we come incarnate. And it was decided, it's like who is willing to offer this gift and this initiation of grief to my Catherine, McLean, and Morgan, my siblings. And my dad raised his hand and said, I will, because I love them so much. And I truly see it that way, because grief it's the most painful initiation and portal that there is. And which is exactly what this portal is created around, because it's so powerful and so painful. It holds so much potential energy to choose how you use it to create from here on out. Like, you get to choose whether or not you are willing to create from this force and completely change your life and your being, or whether you fall victim to this force because it's so painful. So and you see grief take people one of two ways. You see it change their lives, or you see it ruin their lives, because it is, and that's why it's a gift, because at that point of intersection, you are given the choice of whether this becomes the force from which you create everything from here on out, or this becomes the force that unfortunately, like, in a way, eats you alive. It is so powerful. So to
And what
answer
do
your
you,
question, long story
yeah,
long, yes, I do think.
it was a great answer. I don't know if you noticed, but when you said, and something about him deciding, and there was a big beep outside. It's like
Oh,
right at that moment, it just made me think. I was like, oh, that was a little interesting. Him saying hi. But I think that makes a lot of sense to me, given what you just highlighted there. And I mean, you're talking about it really taking people in two directions. And I think this is life as a whole, because there's so many different initiations, and you can be crushed by them. And what you mentioned here a couple times, which I really want to highlight, is you talked about a willingness to use the initiation to your benefit, and that requires a degree of trust in a higher intelligence and a broader perspective. And that's what spiritual development is all about, is designed to help you get that foundation so you can take that broader perspective when these initiations show up in your life. It's I mean, in your case, and I've had a firsthand perspective, you have, from my perspective at least, have so taken it and have like gleaned so much wisdom and knowledge and expansion from your grief. Like, you really have lived what you're talking about, which is using it as a gift, which is so counterintuitive to the human experience, which again is kind of pointing to what we talk a lot about, which is, are you a victim of life, or is life coming from you? Are you a creator? And again, this doesn't mean obviously that you didn't want to lose your dad. You didn't say, but at a higher level, there was, as you were talking about, a contract of experience, and your dad was providing you this experience. And then that shift in perspective is so empowering. And you can feel, even as I speak about that relationship, and I didn't know your dad, I can feel the love there of like being able to serve your soul and your experience in that way. What an honor at a higher level. What an honor.
Right.
And oh my gosh, you almost can get to, and obviously would take time, but like gratitude, appreciation, and reverence for that contract or that experience.
And I think, to your point, what comes up when you say it obviously takes time, is like what came through for me is it does. The portal of grief is so unpredictable, and there's no linear pathway through it. So, for example, in processing his death, the next day and the second day after it happened, I was already in that place of like, it's so clear. It's so clear that
Oh,
he
interesting.
bestowed this gift upon all of us. Like, it is so, so clear that this is his ultimate act of love. And that being said, with also within that same day, you can be in the most extreme guttural pain and
Mm-hmm.
confusion and denial and anger. Like, there's no clear cut like phase that you move from one to the next, which I do think they talk a lot about that in kind of mainstream rhetoric around grief. It's like you're in
Mm-hmm.
this phase and then you're angry and then you're in
Mm-hmm.
denial and then eventually you end up at acceptance. And in my experience of grief has
You
been
call bullshit?
yeah. I'm like, well, for me, it wasn't quite so linear. It wasn't like
Mm-hmm.
day one, I'm angry. Day two, it was day one, I'm experiencing the magnitude, the full spectrum, denial, acceptance, like apathy, confusion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm experiencing the whole thing. And then fast forward 1 year in, same thing. Fast forward, I'm at 2 years now. And granted, the intensity of the waves when it comes, I'm so familiar with it that I now have the tools. I can feel when it's coming. I know how to move inward and hold space for that magnitude and let go of any expectation of what it should be. Is it going to be pain? Is it going to be crying? Is it going to be nostalgia? Is it going to be, you know, letting go of any expectation of what it should be, how it should look, what the linear timeline of it should be. I just feel like it's so important to talk about because it doesn't look the same for any two individuals who are within the grief portal.
Yeah.
And there's so much pressure that we put on ourselves to make progress in some linear
Mm.
way. Like, okay, it's been a year, so I should be, I shouldn't be crying randomly anymore. I shouldn't be so down anymore. Like, I should have it more together. That we have all of these self-proclaimed like markers and timelines that we've placed onto this process, when in reality, it is something that is interwoven into our being now. So the way that it ebbs and flows into our present moment, there's no way to know how that's going to come. There's no way to project as to how that's going to look. It's really just about learning how to expand our threshold to the point where we're able to be in the wave, to dive under the wave, feel the intensity of it, and hold space for it and trust that
Mm.
on the other side, we'll find our footing again. On the other side, we'll be able to stand up again.
I love that so much. And I love how you bring this into the SoulPod portal in such a beautiful way. I think it's going to help a lot of people. And you talking about grief as a wave, that's always made the most sense to me as well. And it's like, yes, you can experience those phases that, you were mentioning, but it's not in this kind of linear experience. It's all of a sudden you see somebody with their dad, or
Mm-hmm.
somebody with a baby or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, oh my gosh, that's not my reality. And the littlest things, and sometimes there's nothing at all, and then all
Mm-hmm.
of a sudden you're experiencing a wave, like you call
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So you spoke about some tools that you have learned, and now you're so familiar with that wave of grief and kind of how to ride it, how to navigate it, dive into it, however you want to approach your grief waves. Can you talk a little bit more about how that's evolved through these last few years?
Yeah. Definitely. And also, before I dive into that, I wanted to expand on one thing you were saying, which is that
Mm.
the triggers of a wave of grief are are like you said, not so clearly rational. It's
Hmm.
not always just like, oh, I see someone with their father. That's definitely a big one. But what I experience and what I think so many people experience in grief is this silent force, because it's this grief is this undercurrent that's always there, always within you and a part of your existence. So and it plays with your reality to the point where
Mm.
it'll be the force that's creating tension. For example, I'm thinking of my relationship during those two last, like, I feel like it's gotten a lot more clear in the last like 6 months, but for that first year, especially, things that were coming up in my relationship that I was like, this has nothing to do with grief. This is about you. This is about him. This is his fault. This is about something he did. When I would get clear, when I would sit down, when I would go on a hike and like really self-inquire, like, what is the root of this? Oh, it's grief. And
Mm.
my husband and I were talking about it recently. I was like, for that first year and a half, it's almost like every single thing, when I got clear and got still and went inward, came back to grief. And you would never
Mm.
know, because
Interesting.
it's playing, grief plays with your reality, your present day, in a way
Mm.
that's not so literal, that's not so like, well, that makes sense. I see this father daughter, how beautiful. I don't have that. It's not so literal all the time, and it's masquerading in our present day interactions. And all of a sudden we're angry. All of a sudden we our fuse is so short, and we don't
Mm.
know why. And so we'll often project that onto our safest people, which is our partner and our family. We'll often project that pain and confusion and sadness and disorientation onto the people that we trust can hold it subconsciously, our partner and our family. So I think a lot of people will probably notice that, especially in that, you know, initial period of grief, there's a lot of tension in these relationships that, until you get really still and come back to, oh, it's grief. Oh, I'm in so
Mm.
much pain. Oh, I'm so sad. And it's coming through this way because it has no other way to come through me other than projecting it onto my partner, onto my friend, onto my job, onto whatever. So I just say that so that people who are listening, if you're in this grief portal, you can give yourself a little bit more grace and can go to the people in your life, the partners, the friends, the siblings, whoever, and can maybe have an open conversation and be really vulnerable of like, I'm not totally sure, but I think a lot of what's happening here is coming from this place of deep, deep pain, of deep, deep
Mm.
sadness.
That's such a good clarification. And it can also, I think you mentioned grace, which is, it seems like to me, one of the antidotes to grief is to just give yourself a lot of grace. And if people understand what you just talked about, then you can also kind of prepare your community and your loved ones for, I'm moving a lot of emotion for who knows how long. And that
Mm-hmm.
emotion has to go somewhere. And you're even somebody who does this proactively with your
Mm-hmm.
practices, with your
Mm-hmm.
meditation, your yoga, your breath work. But it's grief to me seems like another kind of level of this infinite onion that we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about a lot in spiritual development, and how there's so many layers to it. And so
Mm-hmm.
giving yourself that time, that space, that grace is so important. So I love that you highlighted that. It's not just the obvious things. It's
Mm-hmm.
subversive. It's, which makes total sense to me, because a lot of times these difficult emotions, they don't know where to go.
Right.
And they just
Right.
don't know where to go. Does it go into the body? Does it come out through your words? To your point, are you crying? Are you angry? Are you just zoning out and you've gone into
Mhm.
full apathy mode and nothing
Mhm.
matters in life?
Or maybe you're even like laughing and happy. I think that's also
Well, yeah.
important to name because we place so much um again we put this onto grief of like if you're grieving
Yeah.
it
It
has
looks
to
a
look like
certain
this.
way. Yeah.
And if you're not crying, if you're not in pain, obvious pain, it's not still there. But and I talk about this a lot in the grief portal because I think this is, to your earlier question, one of the tools that you have to develop and that inevitably will develop in this portal because you have to. And it's learning how to hold both so openly and like and
Mm.
willingly to hold both. And you start to kind of dissolve this paradigm of duality of like if I'm sad, that means I can also be happy, and instead starting to exist in this you know ever evolving and paradigm where two and three and infinite number of things can exist at the same time, right? Like I can be I can be grieving, I can be in pain, and I can be open to joy and open to the pleasure of sun on my skin and being alive in this moment.
Mm.
Like those both can exist at the same time. And I think a lot of people, when they're grieving, including myself, you you don't you think that in joy, in happiness, you're betraying the grief.
Mm.
You're
Guilt.
right, you're betraying the
Yeah.
person that you loved by not holding yourself here, by not only remaining in pain and grief and sadness. You're somehow communicating to them that I didn't love you as much as I did. When in
Mm.
reality, that is one of the most liberating things we can choose to unlearn and reprogram along our grief journey is that you can hold both. And in being in joy and happiness and pleasure, you're not betraying your grief. You're not negating your grief. The two can still can exist at the same time.
Mm. And that's I think you talked about this in the grief portal, where it's not something to get over, it's something to grow with.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of, myself included at certain points, have thought that it's something to get over and that you want to check that box. You're like, I'm healed, I'm good.
Hmm.
I've crossed the hurdle.
Hmm.
And I love kind of reframing that into grief as something that you just grow with. It's
Right,
it's
right,
alongside, it's a part of you. It's not
right,
outside of you. It's
right. And
like
it's
any of
a
these experiences are not outside of you, they're part of you.
right. And it's an ever evolving force. Like from the moment that you step into that initiation, grief is with you for the rest of your life. Like you'll, and that can sound
Haunting.
overwhelming,
Yeah.
daunting. That's the word, daunting. Or we can orient around that as something that we welcome, as this like almost internal family systems esque, where grief is just this part of us now. It's this force that we dance with, that we welcome to the table, that we don't shame and judge and
Mm.
put into our shadow is again something that we've been so programmed in this culture to do as something that is a burden, that's something that is negative, and instead really welcoming that part of us as something, someone, a part of us that has wisdom to offer, that has
Mm.
so much power embedded into it that we're able to tap into our humanity, into empathy, into a connection to something greater. Like it is, and that's again coming back to the initial opening of this conversation. Overall, it's choosing to welcome that part in as a gift, as a part of the family,
Mm.
as this force that you've been gifted on your journey.
I wonder if this resonates for you. So it feels like to me that grief, there's the mourning side of grief too, the mourning process. And that through the portal, through the initiation, there is a transformation that happens. And I wonder if that transformation is the capacity to love bigger and to love more and to really crack your heart open. And that's from my experience is kind of the gift of grief, is to crack you open to even more love, because grief and love can't be separated. Grief happens because you've experienced love, which is just a remembering of that inherent connection between all things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's how I view love, at least.
Yeah, that definitely resonates. And it is exactly that. It's a cracking open that takes place. And, I don't want to harp on this too much, but it all comes back to our choice. And that's why I think, because we can either see that as now I'm broken, or we can see that as now I've let in more light. Now there's more, a lot of how you articulate it so beautifully is there's more soul that I can, of my essence, there's more soul that can come into this version of self. So when we are cracked open, we're creating space for more of that light. We're illuminating where, density exists. Grief is illuminating where that pain body exists within us. And when we allow more light, more love into our being, it's a transformational experience. And you come out of, or within that experience, you start to see the world so differently. You start to see humanity so differently, of like, we're all going to lose the people we love. They're all going to pass. We're going to pass. You start to see and zoom out and see how, there's this connective thread between us all of loving the people in our lives, and to a point where we don't want to lose them. And it's inevitable. It's inevitable. And so you can start to see how, either we're all experiencing that pain, we've all experienced it, or we all will, and we're all human.
Yeah, this applies to every single person. And I wonder if we can chat a little bit about some of the unexpected forms of grief that can come up in life. And what I mean by this is, when you're younger, there's a lot of the societal conditioning, and it also makes some sense because you're young. There's this perspective of like, all things are possible. And as you get older, you start to make certain decisions. Are you going to have a kid? Or are you not going to have a kid? Are you going to get married or you're not going to be married? Are you going to take this job or you're not going to take that job? You're going to move to this place, not move to that place. Through some of those choices, we're like, one way of experiencing it is that it's a narrowing of what's possible. And you feel like you're more and more walking this particular path, and certain opportunities, especially, I would say for women, especially, we talk about this a lot in my friendships right now, is that choice to have kids or not have kids. And that there's a feeling of loss with either decision. And these are like mini griefs, sometimes not many. They're big. You're grieving, even when you have a child, of what your life could have looked like. If you don't have a kid, what your life could have looked like. And also like aging, as you age, no matter who you are, we're all going to age if we're lucky. There's shifts that are forced into your experience to some degree, no matter how much you biohack. You're going to get older. And I love biohacking, but I think we're going a little crazy on that train right now. Totally. Why don't we work with our fears around death a little bit?
I agree. Our fears around aging. Yeah.
Fears around aging.
Vanity.
Want to be healthy, but also we might be holding ourselves back because we have this deep-seated fear of aging and growing older and eventually dying and transitioning. Um, so I know that people experience these griefs. Um, and I wonder in your experience, Kat, like what's a good way to think about that type of grief?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what comes through is grief. You know,
Mm,
there's no, in a way, belittling anyone's experience of grief. You know,
hmm
one of my dear friends in her transition from being not a mother to a mother, she experienced a lot of grief, and her
hmm
child is now turning 4, and she still comes in and out of these waves of feeling that potential timeline that existed at one point of, you know, a version of her that didn't have that child at that specific time, you know, and
mm,
what she thinks that that timeline could have warranted her. And to me, that grief is real. I think there are definitely, you know, it's a spectrum to some degree. I think losing a really intense soul contract, whether it be a parent, a partner, a really close sibling, friend, you know, I think those are extreme situations within the spectrum where,
yeah, it's all on a gradient. Yeah.
yeah, it's on a gradient. But I think the experience of grief in and of itself moves the same way. It's almost more
hmm
like, as we talk about the spectrum, it's almost like the magnitude of what is unleashed
Yeah.
ex- changes as you move along the spectrum. For example, like losing a parent in my context, the magnitude of what is unleashed is almost, it feels like as big as it could be. The amount of anger, the amount of pain, the amount of sadness, you know, all you'll experience every single emotion at its height, at its magnitude that you've never experienced before. And equal and opposite, you'll also experience joy, bliss, like these
Mm,
newfound levels of the whole spectrum. And I think for a different experience of grief, where it falls at a different place on the spectrum, it behaves the same way. It's going to unleash emotions and sensations that you may have felt, but never to this magnitude before. It's just like that magnitude is what changes. Does that make sense?
mm. It does. It makes me go back to the wave metaphor. And
Mm-hmm.
there's different, they're all waves of
Mm-hmm.
experience. But they can differ in magnitude. And they
Totally.
require different equipment, they require different tools, but they're the
Mm-hmm.
same experience, so to say. So
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. And I'm curious from your perspective, when it comes to grief, I was thinking about this last night and I'm curious what you think. Which energy center you're working mostly with? I think, yeah, I'm just going to ask you that. And when it comes to grief.
Yeah, I think I mean, kind of how you're talking about grief being, it's it's kind of one experience of different gradients. It's a whole energy system experience.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
we talk a lot about in SoulPod trying to isolate into certain energy centers
Hmm.
for the sake of bettering your understanding of those like mini brains, that consciousness, that energy, prana, chi, whatever you want to call it. And and energy centers are really just all these lines of your energy body, this kind of bridge between your physical and the spiritual. And those are all kind of connecting and coalescing in certain areas. And so I think in my experience, it can hit your entire system, but I would say specifically the heart space. I
Yeah.
think
That's
it,
what I arrived at too.
yeah. Yeah.
I was like, I started at the heart space and I was like, oh, it's totally a heart space experience. And then I was going through it. I was like, well, your sense of safety is rattled. Your
hmm
sense of connection's rattled. Your sense of self is rattled. Your
hmm
heart's obviously rattled.
hmm
Your ability to express how this is making you
It's a
feel
whole system. Yeah.
totally disoriented. Everything is
Everything.
is
Oh,
and it's
and I
like,
would
okay.
say, when it comes to death, that's a
Mhm.
crown center
Totally.
experience.
Totally.
And you've talked about, I don't know if you want to share that, how your father has communicated with you since his passing. I mean, this is also big crown center moment, your relationship between life, death, rebirth, infinity, that Sata Nama experience. Um, so yeah, 100%. Everything's getting affected, but I would say the heart space is where the kind of explosion happens.
Hmm. Which is why I think for anyone listening, why it's so extreme, because it's every energy center, it's your whole system is being sh shuffled and, shaken and like thrown into a tornado. And so, so knowing that if you're in grief, allowing for that, to be true. And again, coming back to giving yourself grace of like, no one teaches us how to navigate a whole energy system reboot. Like, no one teaches us how to do that.
Right?
So, yeah, so giving ourselves grace as we're navigating that is just so, so important. So, so important. And to your point around the crown, I would just for a second love to share on that because I do think anyone who is experiencing loss, it's a part of the gift.
Mm.
It's if you're willing to, again, like we touched on earlier, drop into that present moment, drop into this present moment, um, open your crown, clear your channel, and allow for a maturation of sorts to take place where you're now more of a what's the word? Like more of a contestant, if you will, to like bridge the seen and the
Mm.
unseen because you almost have
Hmm.
like more in the game now. You have more of a reason to.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
so your lights turned on, like, oh, kind of like when you talk about connecting with interdimensional beings, it's like, are you online or not? And so if
Yeah.
you're willing to be online, then trust me, the people who love you, who you love, who have transitioned are waiting for you to be like, yes, I'm online. Yes, I'm willing. And trust me, if you're willing, if you're online, the people who I like get chills as I say it, the people who have transitioned into unseen realm are going to to like come in are going to
Hmm.
see that you're online and be like, yes, okay, I'm gonna come in, even if it's just in like a dream or I don't know, my dad will come through a lot and if I'm running, because we used to run a lot together. So when I'm running, he'll come through and drop little like very clear wisdom. If I'm There have definitely been some psychedelic experiences where the veil has become so thin and he is so clearly with me to the point where I've been able to like converse with him in my mind. I'll say something, he laughs, he says something back, and I'm having this little conversation with him that is so real. And the only way I can tell you it's real is the data point of my experience, which is that. And
Is that? It
is
is.
that.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I just want to, I guess, invite anybody who, if loss is your entry point into the grief portal and initiation, to when you're ready, because it doesn't have to be right away, but
Hmm.
when you're ready and feel like you've established that safety in your body, you've expanded the threshold to feel, because connecting with someone who's transitioned isn't always going to be, oh, like, so, it's going to be beautiful, but it's not always going to be like they just gave me wisdom. It will most likely like turn a rock of grief, and you will most likely
Mm.
have an intense emotional response.
Hmm.
I was in a SoulPod journey once, and you guided me into call upon your guides, call upon your angels. My dad so clearly came through,
Mm.
and I went into this, I mean, extreme grief response. I mean, I was wailing to the point where I was like, I wonder if my neighbors are gonna like think I'm okay,
Yeah.
because it was, and
Letting
I
it
think
move.
letting it move and not placing perimeters or boundaries on it and just letting it
Mm,
move. And knowing when you've reached a point of that's the amount I can hold right now,
yeah.
because what I've experienced in grief is that it's almost this, like, it hurts so good when you're in it, when
Mm.
you're crying, when you're excavating the pain. It's like it's a way of connecting. So it feels addicting in a way. Like I just want to
Oh,
keep
interesting.
feeling the pain. I just want to go deeper. I
Hmm.
just want to keep crying. And I've noticed, for me, it reaches a point where it doesn't serve me anymore. It's not cathartic anymore. It's not
Hmm.
moving anymore of the pain. It's
Oh,
it's
interesting.
overindulgence in a way. And so
Yeah.
when you go into that space, when you're
How do
willing to
you
connect,
how do you know when you're there?
it's a it's a discernment that you hone in
Mm.
your working with self, in your process of establishing that inner safety, of expanding that threshold to feel. You become so in tune and attuned to your specific, barometer of safety, of feeling. And you can, when you're discerning, you can notice when it's just the barometer's gone like into the red a little bit, and you can keep
Hmm.
going, indulge, and then you get to a point where you're like, I need to come out, I need to come
Mm.
back, I need to ground, I need to pull my energy back in, I need to, you know essentially, like, disconnect in a way. Like, you're never disconnected, but I need to pull
Hmm.
myself back down into my body and, like, breathe and
Hmm.
come back.
Presence. Be
Yeah.
here. Yeah. Yeah.
So I just say that all for somebody
Mm.
who's wanting to connect with someone who's transitioned, to know all of that, to know that it will be beautiful, it may be extremely painful, and you don't have to go in forever. You
Yeah.
have the choice to pull yourself out when you've reached a point that doesn't feel beneficial anymore.
Yeah. That's a really good reminder. And I think this is such a interesting thing is that for a lot of times, this kind of gift of grief, this opening of the heart space to hold even more, it really is a lot of people's initiation into spiritual work and
Mhm.
development. Because before you've really lost something, someone, whatever kind of loss that is, it's a big shift, it's a transformation, initiation of some sort. You start asking these questions. And a lot of times, people who you've loved, they are acting as that bridge between the non physical and the physical for you as a gift. And if you're willing, to your point, not everybody's willing, if you open up to that, it can really accelerate your spiritual journey because now you have a method of having been exposed to the non physical now, which you
Mhm.
may not have been open to or exposed to before. So I've found with people that grief is often that kind of initiation point into, oh, like if I meditate and I can go into this certain frequency, I can connect. I don't even need a medium or a psychic or anything else. Like you are that. And that is
Mhm.
a greatly empowering experience that is available when you're ready, to your point. You know, it's usually not day one or month two. Um, but it's such an interesting, I saw this, I'm going to assume it's not AI. I have to wonder that these days, but there was somebody who's, I think her good friend had passed. And when she would play a certain song, the lights in her house would go crazy to like the beat of the
Oh,
song. And that
wow.
was, from her perspective, her friend communicating with her. But it can go so much further beyond that. And I've certainly had experiences with people who have passed over that are just wanting you to know that they're good, that they're okay, that they're beautiful, and fine, more than fine, that they're exactly where they should be. And that
I
can bring
think
you a lot of peace.
yeah, I think that's funny. That was what was coming through as you were talking, and then that's where you went. Is that I think another reason or like tendril of grief that is so painful is that we have been conditioned to orient around loss as this like this sad, they're not on this earth anymore. And even, I think people who have experienced loss where they passed in a way that wasn't so peaceful, which is what I experienced. There's so much pain
Mm,
around that that portal for that person of were they
hmm.
scared? Were they in pain?
Totally.
Were they alone? And dis what I've had to work with because from my perspective, my dad was all three of those things, which brings me so much pain. And
Mm,
especially in the beginning, it was so hard for me to work with. And through the entire my entire grief experience, although it's painful, is that it is so clear what my dad is communicating to me is that he's free, that
mm,
there is it's beautiful to be incarnated on this planet. Yes, it's beautiful to, you know, live in these soul contracts, to be somebody's father, to be somebody's spouse, to be a sibling. Like it's so, so beautiful, this human experience. And when we pass, when we transition, we're essentially free. Like he is the sunset.
hmm.
He is the wind. He is the mountain that I see when I drive down. He is the beauty that is everything, that is
Yeah.
everywhere. So there's this there's this human desire to feel sad that they're not in their body anymore. Like how sad for them that they're not alive anymore. But
Hmm.
that really is just our culture that chooses to view and orient around death and loss that way because it's a
Yeah.
liberation.
It's a liberate. I think a lot of that has to do with organized religions' perspectives on death, the heaven and hell concept, which from my direct experience, I just do not buy into at all. I think that was like a unfortunate interpretation of levels of consciousness and
Mhm.
the associated experiences. But when they cross over, they are they're free, they are expanded, they are
Yeah.
light, they
Oh,
are moving
yeah.
on to whatever it is that they wanted to experience.
Yeah, they get to be oneness. They get to
Yeah.
return home. And,
Hmm.
like he's not sitting in 2 hours of traffic on the five anymore. He's oneness, I'm like,
He's he's done. He's like, I'm good.
yeah, he's not paying his taxes
Yeah.
anymore. He's oneness.
Yeah.
I'm like, hell yeah.
And take it or leave it, but I do know of people who have passed, um that you could try to define as like having done some things in their lives that were really harmful to other people. And my experience with those beings is they're still fine. They're still good. And there's so much love and understanding and so much processing that happens on the other side, even for a life that maybe wasn't as virtuous as many of the people that we're talking about here today. But my experience has been that that still holds true. There is no like judgment. There is literally no judgment on the other side
Mhm.
from from my perspective.
Yeah,
And I
which is a
think that
radical shift from like Judgment Day.
ex- exactly, and the life review process is not a judgment process. It's a opportunity for expansion. It is like an integration process. And I just do not believe that there's any judgment in that. And that there may be things that even in our lifetime we were aware of and things that we were not aware of. But I just want to say that for people who are going through grief with different types of people in your life.
Yeah.
And that grief can still look the same way, even when you maybe didn't have a great relationship with somebody.
Totally.
And that's okay that you're grieving that person. That's natural. That's it shows that they were impactful in your life in whatever way that was. And to honor that, to honor your grief, to honor your process.
Yeah.
And I'm just so grateful, Kat, that you created this portal in SoulPod that's going to be going live here. And I think it's just such a powerful place. And so to close out, if there's anything else you want to say about the grief portal, and then for somebody who feels isolated in their grief during this time and maybe not understood by family or friends, what would be your kind of first set of guidance for them? What's one thing they can do to stay connected to themselves or others?
Yeah, what comes through is really like honoring yourself. If you don't feel like, because grief can feel isolating, and it can feel like no one understands, no one gets it, because in reality no one
No one
does. Like, it
could.
is
Yeah.
yours. Yeah, it is only yours. It's your love and your relationship that you're grieving. And so no one really does. And the people in your life want to support you. They want to learn how to navigate this grief with you. And so how to help them help you, how to help them support you, is by you honoring your grief, creating space to really get to know what's going on so that you can go to them and say, this is what I'm experiencing. It's so painful. This is what I need. And that can look like so many different things. I need you to ask me about my dad more. I need you to, not ask me about my dad more. There's no linear way to know how to navigate it. So it's really about empowering yourself to trust that your unique journey with grief is specifically yours and meant for you to go inward, to create space to get to know it, to hold space for it, to dance with it, to welcome it into your life. And yeah, it's a time where, despite feeling alone, which I definitely relate to, we're able to connect with the people in our lives on a much deeper, more intimate level if we're willing to share our experience, if we're willing to be vulnerable about the pain. And when things come up in your relationship and you realize, oh, it's because I'm grieving, coming back to that, sharing that, oh, it's because I'm so sad,
Yeah.
and really just allowing yourself to be human and not putting any boundary, any timeline, any,
Expectation.
Yeah.
So much
Onto
easier said than done. I know
so
for
much easier
many of
said than
us.
done. Yes. But I think hopefully just like even hearing that permission slip of like,
Yeah.
okay, I don't have to show up and smile at this event because people want me to. I don't have to be this. I don't have to be anything other than what I'm experiencing in this moment. And yeah, that's what's coming through for that.
I think that's very helpful. And it can be hard for the relationships around you, right? When you're going through grief, because you can barely verbalize what it is that you're going through, much less tell other people
Yeah.
how to help you, because it's a difficult, I know for the people that are in the community around grief, that relationship can be, to your point, tense, because there can be certain certain ways that you want people to show up, certain ways you don't want people to show up, and the communication there can get really challenging. And so I think that advice of honoring your process, giving yourself lots of extra space and grace. And then, I wonder if, like, when you can, in some sort of regular cadence, come back to yourself and be like, okay, what do I need to tell people around me that I need? What do I need to tell my mom? What do I need to tell my sister-in-law, my brothers, my partner, my friends? What is not working for me right now?
Yeah.
And, that dance with community can be interesting because some people will be able to meet you there and maybe some people won't be able to.
Mm-hmm.
And then also being okay with that.
Yeah.
So it's a tall order. It's a tall order, but as much as you can honor, this is to your point, this is throat chakra work. Communicating your truth to your current highest understanding. That's all you can do. Let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah. And just not judging the way that you need to express. Like, I went through a phase where I had to go into the forest and throw rocks at trees. I was so angry. I needed to just like do something. I didn't have an outlet. And my husband was like, maybe you should just like go throw rocks at stuff. And I was like, okay. Okay, let's try that. And just there's no judgment as to how the expression needs to happen, but know that it has to. Know that if you don't express in whatever way that needs to happen, it, without sounding too like doomsday, but it will create more destruction than it will help you. It will not. It'll be harder for it to be a gift if we don't express. Like, you have to become familiar with expression and however that looks.
I agree. Beautiful.
And then
Lovely.
is there is there
anything
final
else
words
you
on
want
the
to?
grief portal?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this portal to go live. I created it I created it initially like a year ago when I was like really in the depths of grief. And then, for it to be birthed, like to finally come live in the app, it came through at the perfect time because I was able to reach a whole nother, phase, if you will, of my grieving and then go back through and, you know, with a fine tooth comb of like, okay, for the version of myself that was 1 day out of grief, for the version of myself that was 1 year into grief, for the version of myself who's 2 years into grief, how can I weave all of the things that each of these versions of me needs into this tool, into this portal? And because they're all different things, they're all different. Each of those versions of me needed different wisdom, needed different permissions. And so this portal is really a place to go when and if you're willing to transmute this force into one that you create from. That's really the underlying through thread of the portal, is like, you are so much stronger than you know. And this experience, again, something we've touched on so many times, is here for your soul's unique evolution. So if you're willing to believe that, if you're willing to choose that for yourself, this is the portal for that. This is the place where you go to harness this pain, this force, this energy, and come out the other end more connected to self, more empowered, or more rooted in your being as a creator. So yeah.
Love that. So everybody who is ready for that and willing, I think that's really great guidance. You can find the grief portal in SoulPod. And let us know if you have any questions or need any support. You can always reach out to us.
Yeah, you can
And
always reach
sending,
out to me too.
yeah, reach out to Kat. We'll drop her info in the show notes as well if you want to talk with her. And sending you all so much love in this journey of grief, and overall sending you so much love. And we will see you next time. And thank you, Kat, for journeying with me in this conversation. It was so powerful. I could feel your dad a number of
Mm,
times. I could feel him. And it was a
me
really,
too.
really beautiful.
I could too. Thank you for guiding us through this topic and yeah, holding space so beautifully.
My pleasure and honor. Thank you. Thank you for journeying with us today, Light Being. We hope you enjoyed the episode. And before you go, we want to invite you to explore the SoulPod app, where you can immerse yourself in daily lessons, guided meditations, and breath work to develop a soul nourishing daily ritual and tune back into your own inner guidance system. You can download SoulPod in the App Store or directly from the show notes to start your free trial today and awaken the ancient wisdom within you.